And welcome, esports fans, one and all, to another week of the PCS Spring Split 2022. We are 3 weeks in officially. I am Pyrotechnics. I'm joined by Clement on the cast tonight for what is going to be a little bit of a shorter broadcast than usual, but we'll fill you in with all those details. But before we get underway, I would like to take a brief moment to thank our wonderful sponsors. They are, of course, CTBC Bank and Caliber. Thank you for making the PCS possible. Now, Clement, it may be a shorter day, but we do still have some real humdingers on the horizon.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have seen the reports from the PCS itself that PSG, they have a couple of members that might have gotten COVID, so they have their games delayed. And of course, for Sem 9, they are participating in the Southeast Asian Games, so aren't able to show up here today either. So we're going to have a relatively short day with only 3 games, but we're going to make it as enjoyable as possible.
Consider it a bit of an appetizer for the entree that's going to be tomorrow and the next week, where we will be making up all of those games. For the full schedule, you, of course, can check out the PCS Twitter as well as, you'll see it in the chat as well. Everything's going to be coming through, and for today's games, even though there's only 3 of them, I'm really excited because we're going to get to answer some things here, Clement, as we get closer and closer to closing out that first round robin. Right now, there's only a handful of squads that are really looking fully shored up at the top, and honestly, I think we've got some questions for some of our other teams. One of the teams today, Beyond Gaming, a little further down the standings than I would have expected. They're going to be taking on a team that's hot on their heels in Frank.
Exactly. I think everyone has pretty much established our top 4 teams. It's the 3 different clones of J-Team, plus PSG still in the running up there. But 5 and 6 are hotly contested, and that's exactly what we get today. We're going to be touching on that a little bit further down into our today's matchup, but right now you can see Megabank Beyond Gaming only 1 spot ahead of Frank Esports, and I think that's where everyone really has their kind of eyes on. There is a sort of a gap, I would say, from the bottom 2 teams to the kind of 5th to 8th place, but that 5th to 8th is where I think a lot of things can sort of change.
Absolutely. I mean, it's with best of ones, things can shuffle so fast that it really can just seem almost dizzying. And I think any of those teams that are towards the bottom, maybe not Sem 9 until we see a little more of them, have the chance to break out more. Hurricane Gaming still have a lot of questions to answer for themselves, having only taken that 1 game off the Malaysian representatives. But we saw strength in the early part of the split from Meta Falcon team. We saw Impunity Esports really coming back into this, getting 2 wins in the last week. And also with their new support in the roster, I think this team has found a winning formula, and I'm excited to see if they can do what seemed only last week like the impossible against the likes of Deep Cross Gaming. But speaking of Deep Cross Gaming, we got to talk about our player of the week, because Criscata, the rookie, has been popping off. Now, if you tuned in to only the final moments of the CFO game, you'd be forgiven for thinking this guy maybe isn't that good. Everybody makes mistakes. He's been going ham on some of these champions, and they've been giving him quite a lot of powerful tools. The Zeri and the Jinx have been especially excellent.
Yeah, he's been doing it with a lot of different champions. The Zeri pick, I think, is really interesting because a lot of teams just sort of underestimated this rookie. He got 2 Zeri games to play, popped off on both of them, was our DPS champion for quite a while until the final game against CFO later on, which, I would say was definitely not his strongest showing. But as you can see here, Zeri is absolutely busted, and you should not give Cascada Zeri under any circumstances. He absolutely murder you with this champion. They also had this really interesting game where they had the combo, the reset that we see with Jinx alongside with the Urgot, sniping people down from long range. So they're finding really creative ways by attaching him into the team. He's going to be a hyper carry most of the time, but they are going to run compositions that also fit what that champion does and try to build around him as well.
Yeah, I really like the creativity we've seen out of Deep Cross Gaming, and here, of course, is their Beyond match that we just saw. Some really fantastic play coming out of Nesty on Rise. This was the moment where I thought, okay, maybe Nesty is not going to be a Bard double enchanter one-trick the rest of the split, or a Vigar as a backup. Definitely a player that I think we still want to have some more conversations about, but this one being all about Cascada, he's definitely stepped up when he's gotten the chance on those hyper carries, and for every missed Super Mega Death Rocket, there's something like that, and it's just beautiful to see. Excellently played by the rookie AD carry, especially in a bit of a crowded field.
Exactly. I think if you're looking at the rookies, Cascada and ICU are definitely the ones that have popped off the most. You could say that some of these wins are not really directly impinging on their performances, but I would say they've given us such solid showcases of what they can do in terms of mechanics, in terms of creativity. So those are the 2 names that I would just kind of memorize out of the field. As we move on to the bans and picks, Zeri, I think there's no surprises. Gwen, kind of the same thing. But the really interesting ones are coming out from our top laner. Now, we did kind of mention Deep Cross Gaming, and Leaky right now actually has the best stats in terms of the laning phase out of all of our players, not just the top laners, which I think is really interesting because it doesn't really pass the eye test. Like, if I'm being completely honest, I think Rest and Liang still outperformed him in the lane itself, but he has been going to creative picks and making sure that Hana can always find a kill when he goes to the top lane. Urgot is a perfect example of that, gets to push the lane, has to execute when his jungler does come in. So it's just, a great showcase of what Deep Cross Gaming can do. They're really thinking about how to bend the rules of the game to their favor.
Yeah, and that's what's fun to watch about this team, that they do those more creative things. Now, the other big pick that I think maybe surprised some people was, of course, that Meta Falcon team top Darius. That, of course, came out for Taco. One of our Taco... I mean, it was interesting. It didn't win the game, but you're up against Tanabe. I don't think we expect it all the time. It was still fun to watch, and I do like a team that is trying to experiment. Credit to MFT for moving away from the big 5-man wombo combo and trying something different. Unfortunately, you gave yourself a really tough opponent to do that against. But yeah, that was in the past. This is in the future. Let's talk about today's matches, Clement. We've started off the day here with Beyond Gaming versus Frank Esports, and it is kind of an interesting matchup because on paper, before the split started, we would have expected this to be like a really walloping in favor of Beyond, but there have been stumbling blocks for this squad, and Frank Esports are just starting to step up to the plate, and only 1 win behind this squad.
Yeah, they're definitely going to be the battle of the 5th here, who gets to stay on the upper half of the bracket. And, we could go into this one a little bit more, but I also really like our second match of the game, Deep Cross Gaming versus Impunity, because these 2 guys have the most creative comps out of anyone that we have in the PCS right now. We have the roaming Bard versus the Zed Jungle, and kind of like the one-shot Yasuo combos coming out as well from Impunity. So the second one is the one where I feel like we're actually going to get the most fireworks in terms of 2 like evil geniuses battling each other.
Yeah, and that's always going to make for a lot of fun. And I do think it's appropriate to call Nesty an evil genius, given that he's been locking the Vigar quite a bit. Our last game of the day, of course, we're going to close out with CFO versus Hurricane Gaming. And, Clement, CTBC Bank may be Taiwan's top financial institution. They've also got the top team in the PCS. We'll talk about them later, because we got Megabank Beyond Gaming here on stage. As you saw their roster flash before you, we will have Liang in the top lane once again. And I do think that is the correct choice. Maybe Li Kai gets a chance again. He did not look good on the Gwen. This is the core 5 as far as I'm concerned.
And honestly, this team has been slightly underperforming. They're only sitting at 3-3 right now. A big problem we have seen of this squad is once you ban Minji's Akali, he doesn't really seem that comfortable on other champions. Even when he picks up the Zoe, we don't see Mega Bank Beyond Gaming even trying to run a poke composition at all. So that's going to be the big question coming in today. What does Minji have to play after the Akali is banned out? And can Mega Bank Beyond Gaming actually craft them a composition that fits Minji's playstyle?
Yeah, that is a little bit troubling because it seemed like after a couple of games, the questions were all answered. I think maybe we bought into the hype a little bit of, hey, they beat PSG, who are trying to figure themselves out. Well, the turntables at that point, right? Because PSG picked themselves right back up the floor, figured out how to use Bey and Juhan to what I would argue is maybe not their fullest potential, but certainly a massive improvement. And Beyond have kind of been left searching once they don't get those comfortable picks. Perhaps their opponents tonight can find a way to pick them apart. They are Frank Esports, Kurt, Hollow, Pretender, Eminem, and K2. And it's interesting you talk about the mid laner because on the Frank Esports side, I think Pretender, formerly known as Kana, the substitute player for PSG who was loaned to this team, has started to step up. We started to see him shine on some of his favorite champions, the more control mages, the likes of Victor. He's been solidly laning, and I'm curious if they can put Minji on the back foot here. That may be the key to defeating Beyond Gaming.
I have to agree with that. I think Pretender is actually far better in the laning phase. He's averaging plus 14 CS right now at the 15-minute mark, and he's also the DPS king in the entirety of the PCS. That's why I was a little bit surprised to see Triskata right there, because even though he held on that title for the majority of the week, Pretender was the one to eventually knock him down. However, the bot lane is going to be our highlight matchup, as both of these guys are hyper carries, and they all share very similar champion priorities. These champion picks that we see right here, they're not they're not displayed according to the champion frequency, but both of them have a huge priority for Aphelios. They always take the Aphelios over any other pick. So that's going to be another big sort of marker as we go into the draft phase. Who actually gets the Moon Man and who gets to dominate the late game team fights with it.
It is interesting because it does seem like most of the other bot laners in this league, given the chance, would probably prefer the Jinx, but these two are a little bit more on the exception. They'd rather be dishing out the consistent damage, winning the laning phase when you can. It was interesting to see Wako really develop as a player, because I think that is one of the places that he does differ from Doggo, the hotshot that we saw in Beyond Gaming last year, now in the LPL. For Eminem, also an experienced player in this roster, he has been, honestly, I think definitely one of the shining lights, and with K2 in particular, I think he has been looking good. But I also want to give some credit to Kino on Wako's side, because those engages he sets up are incredible. So it's not just the AD carries, it's the supports behind them. But we're in the picks and bans. Let's see how this one shakes out. Beyond Gaming up against Frank Esports.
So I definitely expect Frank Esports to have to ban out the Gwen. That has been kind of the weak spot for Frank Esports over so many games, as Kurt has kind of shown himself to just be sort of that tank player. They definitely have a utility topside with both Kurt and Holo. You can tell Beyond Gaming reading that as well, just banning away the Hecarim, one of the champions Holo does have a win on. And I also feel like Set would actually be something that is very powerful in the hands of Kino. Eminem so far is just playing the Jinx, just playing the Aphelios, and neither of those champions have great escape. So Set really comes in as a powerful tool and kind of frees up Husha to go for more early game domination. As we actually see the Gwen being left open here, Akali being left open here as well. There's just so many tools for Beyond.
That's a mistake. We just were talking about how Minji hasn't looked good on not Akali, and they just leave it open for him. But they are going to try and handshake, say we can take a power pick for ourselves and not have to deal with it. This will be the first time Kurt, unless they flex this to Hollow, gets a chance to play the Gwen. And I was wondering about this top laner because he started in this league really just kind of being on Gragas duty constantly, and we never really got to tell if he's actually good. And we don't talk about the Karma game. I don't know if that was his fault. They didn't know how to do double enchanters, whatever. Wash, rinse, repeat. But they've got two power picks. They just traded it for Minji's preferred champion.
And on any other draft, I would say that Frank are hands down winning. But because of the IDs of these guys and because of their play style, I'm not so sure. Beyond Gaming so far 2-0 on the Akali pick themselves. It really enables them to just play a 1-3-1. And there are still picks like the Jace, like the Jax, that can go up against the Gwen and have a fairly decent result here. And you can tell Beyond Gaming are not even sweating about that top lane pick. They're perfectly willing to go into the second ban phase without giving them his champion just yet.
Yeah, and Beyond, they're going to have Wako buck the trend of preferring the Aphelios and instead just straight up pick up the Jinx. They're going to pair it alongside Husha's Lee Sin, so setting themselves up for quite a bit of damage and maybe not necessarily lane dominance in that bottom side if they do take that handshake, but they could honestly just ban away the Aphelios and put Eminem on an inferior matchup.
Yeah, we only seen the Caitlyn come out from Eminem afterwards, and Caitlyn so far just hasn't been very impressive on 12.3, not a very good win rate overall. So it's interesting to see Frank do this sort of change up. They definitely have a very strong top side in terms of their power picks, but that's not where their power lies in terms of their actual players. So we'll see if Kurt has been able to shape up a little bit, but as you mentioned, the Aphelios is definitely out the window, and as per my guess as well, Set is definitely not going to make it throughout the ban phase. Kino just way too good of a player on that champion, which does leave us to, maybe Pretender being the one kind of have to carry this entire ship together. If you're already drafting the Gwen, you have the Xin Zhao, it is a very strong signal to actually just play towards your top side rather than play towards Eminem. And, I think Pretender has actually been more efficient with the resources he's been given compared to even Eminem.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to make here. Pretender maybe hasn't looked as good on paper consistently, but he's been able to do more with less. Beyond Gaming will round out by banning Twisted Fate away, so clearly they are keeping their eyes on the mid laner too. Now, in terms of champions he's played, it's mostly been the Victor in the mid lane, but he has done a handful of other things. We got a Veigar game out of him, we got an Ahri game as well. So I do think Pretender has some range. I'm curious to see what he does here against the Akali of Minji. The Ezreal comes out from Eminem, that's no surprise there. And, oh boy, we saw this out of Taco earlier, and I don't want to get too excited for hovers, but I did see the Zed and thought, could they do that? Could they do like a top lane flex? Maybe, I don't know. But I think it's going to be something a little bit different. They do grab the Jace for Leon up in the top side, so look at the damage they've got. This, Clement, correct me if I'm wrong, this feels like a good old 1-3-1.
It definitely feels that way, and this is Beyond Gaming's sort of bread and butter composition. They're so good at finding flank angles, doing these really elaborate Drake teamfight setups where they pincer you from 3 different directions and just crush your team. I think Beyond Gaming are the best team out of any to kind of play this style. And now we do see a little bit of defensive added to the bottom lane because we do have a burst comp coming in from Eminem and K2 down in the bottom side. So Braum is a great pick right there. You can really block out a lot of Ezreal's skill shot damage coming into that. And this is going to be very interesting to see what Pretender does pick up here. As we did guess, this sort of composition does trend very heavily for the top side, something completely new for Frank Esports. We have not seen them try to run something like this, while Eminem will get pushed in on the Ezreal. So they're completely flipping their strategy upside down, while Beyond Gaming gets probably their most comfortable draft of the season.
Yeah, I think Beyond really got just about everything they wanted out of this. Obviously the Gwen being a high contested pick here in the PCS, it doesn't necessarily mean Beyond are going to prefer it. In fact, Leong hasn't even got a single game on it. That was Lee Kai that played it, and well, it didn't look that great. This is going to be an interesting one. Beyond so much comfort, and Frank trying something new. Well, they are the new kids on the block, Clement. Maybe they can surprise us, but I do feel like Beyond got a much better draft on paper.
Yeah, for me, it's really hard to see what Frank Esports want to do in the late game. I don't think their entire composition actually synergizes very well together. You have pieces that want to move in like the Xin Zhao and the Gwen, and then pieces that really want to stay back like the Ezreal. So it's going to be interesting to see how they pilot this composition, but there is a very strong point in the mid and jungle. Again, Akali's not going to do much in the early phases of the game. Veigar actually has a ton of burst damage when he hits 6. So you do see a couple of windows right there with the Xin Zhao and the Veigar. If they can hit 6 together, which I do expect them to be able to accomplish, they have a massive power spike that they can throw around in that sort of 7 to 8 minute, maybe that first Herald fight is where I really see Frank Esports dominating.
Not only that, if there is a weakness of the Beyond Gaming comp, it's that they really are light on frontline tank champions. You talked about adding defense in with the Braum at the end. That's really the only champion that can full-on face tank a Vygar ultimate. Maybe the Lee Sin. It really just depends, I think, on how Husha builds it. But I mean, you've got 3 hardcore squishy champions that he can just click delete on, so that could turn the tables in this fight. The question is, will they be able to use that window? Are Frank Esports disciplined enough as a team? They've had some weeks together now, but you have to remember, this is a squad that got put together at the last minute to build a team. And honestly, I'm impressed that they've gotten as far as they have. It's going to be a tall order against the likes of Megabank Beyond Gaming here, but if they can do it, ooh, that would be a spicy start to week number 3 as we get on to Summoner's Rift.
We do have to remember Beyond Gaming were our world's representative in the PCS, so they have that chip on their shoulder where they're expected to go top 2 and top 3 in the region. If they're now fighting for scraps 5th and 6th, it's really a huge blow to their prestige, as we will be taking a short look at some of these summoners here. A lot of the usual suspects, but we do have Pretender coming in with the unsealed spellbook here, so we can see how he kind of uses that. A lot of times you do want that unsealed spellbook just for the exhaust against the Akali. You can get surprised by Minji sometimes, so we will see what his first choice is, as I imagine we go closer to the level 6 stage.
Yeah, this seems like it's been kind of trending this way for the Vygar players here in the PCS. It's certainly been a Nesty special at the very least. As we look to get things underway here, you talked about how the bottom lane expected to be pushed in. Playing a very reverse style, can Frank pull that off? I mean, Kurt's been given the tools to succeed. He's definitely somebody I want to keep my eye on, because on paper, that is definitely a bit of a mismatch. Liang has looked pretty darn good, in my opinion, on a number of these champions. He's had 3 Trendemir games, obviously had to have his fun with the Hullbreaker. At the same time, I'm curious to see what he does against a Gwen. I mean, he'll have the ability to get in there and go to the skies, but I feel like Kurt is just a big question mark. I mean, he could be great, or he could fall flat on his face. We don't know yet.
So far, I've not been very impressed with his laning phase overall, so I do expect this Gwen to kind of be a sort of late game insurance pick. There's really no denying Gwen her power spikes once she gets those 3 items up, and she can just flank you from the back line. She's incredibly consistent, and that's why she's pretty much a must-ban throughout 12.3 regions here. But I don't expect the early game to be that strong coming out of Kurt's Gwen, at least not against this the Jace from Liang. On the other hand, I do really want to see how Frank sort of play this situation out, as we do have a good trade here.
Yeah, a lot of supports trading health bars. Ooh, they got a stun off, and K2 a little bit low here. I mean, this is what we expected was the push-in. It's not just the champion choices. It's also Wako and Kino, and, you know, I want to give Eminem and K2 a lot of credit for being a very strong duo, but I think if you're talking about just, like, pound-for-pound skill, I think Beyond Gaming's bot lane edges them out just a bit.
Yeah, I feel like the trade went pretty poorly for Frank after the early level 2. When they actually engaged, we got the level 2 from Kino, so he wasn't playing from a deficit in terms of his resistances. And you also had those 3 pesky backline minions still there, so not a lot of damage coming out from Eminem. And hands down, Wako and Kino do win the trade quite comfortably. In the mid lane, though, this is kind of what we expected. You know the Minji special, you know the routine. He's pretty much non-existent before level 6, and then he pops off on the first Herald.
Yeah, and Husha knows that too. He's not worried about his mid laner getting pushed in. In fact, he's going to be making a trip up to Frank Esports Krug camp, and I'm smelling a dive here on both sides of the map as Hollow is coming in undetected in Tribush. Is that worth the effort? That's the question. You've got a Braum to deal with. They might just handshake camps, but I think they want kills.
Ooh, they have to sync up everything so well here. There is 2 instances of hard crowd control here, so let's see if K2 can make it happen.
Fully telegraphed, but it doesn't even matter. They've got them locked under tower. However, First Blood goes the way of Wako. Things go a little sideways here as Eminem ends up tanking tower, and Holo is forced to flash out. They trade 1 for 2. But if you're Beyond Gaming, that could have been far worse.
Yeah, it ends up still being pretty damn good for the side of Frank Esports. They deny the entire minion wave, and I was getting very worried right there because, as you saw, the first E from Leona didn't actually land the stun onto Wako, or maybe he cleansed it afterwards, or very risky dive, but at the end, it was tanked up super well, and I think Eminem had a large part to do with that. Usually you just see, the frontliners going in and just taking up all the damage, but Eminem was one of the first ones to actually tank a tower shot there, so it did buy a lot of time for that crowd control to actually land. So we'll watch this again. K2 pretty much knows he's a sacrificial lamb here, but after K2, I believe it's Eminem that actually takes the damage here, so it does allow Holo to finish up with the extra Xin Zhao power spike, and that could have gone sideways, as you mentioned, but overall, Frank Esports is still a massive win in the bottom side.
Yeah, and we almost saw things going sideways in the mid lane for a second as we tabbed away into the replay, but it does look like Pretender and K2 were just fine. Husha was sniffing around, and it was Frank that searched for First Blood. Although they got First Blooded, they still picked up the trade in their advantage and denying a little bit of farm. That's certainly what you like to see on a bot lane that is, as you said, is kind of supposed to be pushed in a little bit. There is a bit of an edge there for Eminem now in the CS. Just getting as much use on that Sheen as possible while stacking up the tier. Which are going to see Holo in the distance, I believe, as the two traded on camps. And there's actually been a little bit low prio as far as, like, trying to set up River Vision until now. There is a... Okay, there is going to be a control ward sitting inside of the Dragon Pit, but Husha just spots it off the edge as that Hextech Drake not really being looked at by either team for the time being. They've been focused on trying to get lanes ahead.
Yeah, and this is advantage to Frank Esports, as they do know where Husha is. Well, they're not sure where Holo is going to be, so they should be able to pick the engagement that they want. Husha going in.
Yeah, and actually it's going to be K2 going in one more time. Maybe he regrets his decision there. As you could see, Minji was smelling blood in the water. They will disengage, turn their attention back around, and now...
A TP?
Pretender TP? That seems overkill.
Yeah, very interesting. He doesn't have much to do in the bottom lane for sure, and they're going in.
They want to dive it. K2's going in. He's got the Eye of the Tiger, but he might be dead in a moment. Wako is going to take him out, and that is an unforced error from Frank Esports.
Yeah, I feel like the TP is understandable because, well, there's not much for him to actually do in the mid lane, but the offense from the bottom side, especially from K2, it was way too early. You could see that Pretender, even with the flash, wasn't able to follow up with a potential crowd control, and now we have Holo getting caught.
Yeah, Holo, I don't think he was really expecting the full aggression there from Husha, and he's completely isolated. Now Wako gets excited. Eminem can't do a damn thing. And all of a sudden, all those gains down bot just turn in favor of Megabank Beyond Gaming.
I did not expect that result. Remember when I said this should be Frank Esports' strong point, since they have full vision on Husha? They have that much of an intelligence gap, but they just executed it so poorly right there. Just being really forced on the engage from K2, and then Holo just gets caught completely window shopping. That was kind of inexcusable. It wasn't like Husha was doing anything very subtle. He actually just straight up walked into the brush and caught him with his pants down.
Yeah, I mean, Holo could have seen that coming a million miles away. Checking back in with the mid lane, Minji, of course. That's how you play against the Vike Arcade. You just try to do your best to dodge the dark matter constantly dropping on your head. But this is the point where Minji should start having the power spike. Obviously, Pretender, yeah, like the thing about the teleport, not as necessary when you have the Unsealed Spellbook, because now he's sitting on the Ignite. Would be a little bit worried for a potential 1v1 dive going on, and keeping our eyes on where Beyond want to move their chess pieces next. Obviously, Husha here up top going to be getting Scuttle Vision, and neither team has really looked at neutral objectives this game, but that is about to change as soon as that crab goes down. There we go. Actually, doesn't even finish it. It should. There we go. Start onto Shelly, and this is something that does seem to be more the PCS special, is the focus more topside on these objectives as opposed to Dragons. It is a lot about the Rift Herald, but this is not going to be free as Kurt and Holo are hanging around. Pretender coming around the backside now, and Husha and Minji have to make a hard call.
Yeah, there's great burst potential here from Pretender. If anyone gets caught, it could just be a death sentence.
Ooh. Oh boy, it's going to reset. They actually want to take this. A very tense moment, and it looks like it's just going to yo-yo back and forth, and I think Husha might have this in the end, but Frank have the momentum, and they actually look for Kino as the dual laners of both teams have made their way into mid. And it just keeps swinging.
And at this point, Liang is doing free damage to the tower. He's also cut off the path from Kurt, so Frank really only have one option left to them. They do have to hard engage.
Yeah, and look at that, the counter. Kino is actually going to pop a stopwatch, and that buys enough time for the rest of Beyond to react here. The kickback from Husha. In goes the mid laner. Minji popping off, and it's Liang that opens hostilities by getting the kill. A double over on the Shock Blast, and they just tag team it through. Beyond low on health bars, but have all 5 alive.
That was absolutely beautiful read from Beyond Gaming. They played that expertly. Kino surviving the ultimate, just gets the shield up in time. Baby. It was really awkward for Frank because before this fight, the top lane was already losing by 30 CS. If Kurt tried to defend his own tower by walking through the try, he would be losing at least 2 plates or maybe even his life in that situation. So Frank Esports, they had to hard force and engage, and Beyond Gaming were completely ready. Look at this formation here. They have Kino soaking up the majority of the damage, and you instantly have Liang transferring from the top side. Kino has his stopwatch ready. You get the 3-man bowling pin from Husha. Tons of crowd control, tons of damage. Minji pops back out of the fight, taking most of the burst from Pretender, and they get the objective plus the top lane. That was just so well done.
Charge. Ooh. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, and this is the team coordination gap, right? Like, I mean, we could talk about how Kurt pretty much hard lost top lane, but that was definitely more on the team decision making. Frank Esports finding themselves down about 3.7 thousand gold, and Liang opening up with a salvo for some kills. A really nice setup from Minji there in the backline. And, you know, I almost wanted to say, oh, Wako's a little far away and he can't really get involved. He doesn't need to. He's not even on a full item yet. And he's already gotten a couple kills fed to him. So kind of did exactly what he needed in that with the zap following into the Mega Death Rocket. Honestly, it's beautiful from Beyond.
I think that idea from Leon to continue the push top lane just put Frank Esports in such a tough spot. If they didn't do anything, they were just going to bleed out on the top side. And if they did, well, Beyond Gaming were prepared for that as well. So it really is Beyond Gaming and their ability to play the 1-3-1 or like the split push a lot of the times is their ability to juggle aggro in 2 places and present difficult options for teams on both sides. That is something that I just feel like it just requires a lot of thinking ahead from a team, and it's definitely not something that can be pulled off by, I think, teams that haven't stayed together as long. For instance, Frank Esports.
Yeah, I mean, individual play skill is great, and oh, Liang, that's just rude.
Oh, that's nasty.
Oh man, yeah, you know, he's setting it up. He knows exactly what's happening. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the team coordination is huge. Not to mention, of course, 3 of these 5 players were on the same roster together at Worlds. That experience means something. Playing stages or no, it still counts for quite a lot. And you talked about them having a chip on their shoulder, but they certainly also have quite an experienced pedigree. Now, there is a Frank Esports Death Brush forming, but with Husha, this is actually a straight-up 3v3. And let's see if they take the bait. They've got to know something's up here.
They have the question marks there already, and if they want something to happen, they will send Kino in first. Looks like Frank Esports are not going to stay around for this one. The minion wave is already gone past them at this point, and they're just going to call it off completely. They know that it's been a little bit too long, and with Beyond Gaming going into their jungle and not finding anyone, that pretty much just leaves that brush where they could be.
Yeah, it's kind of like a process of elimination. They just know that something had to be up in that. And again, Beyond exercising some patience, showing us that they do have that coordination, the game sense, that we have been questioning a little bit in some of these games where they just haven't been able to close it out. 13 minutes on the clock, a healthy lead for this team, doing exactly what they need to, and just in control of the map. A lot of wards around this bot side river. They managed to get a couple into the jungle as well, and that opens up opportunities for a Husha dive, as Pretender does spot him clearing the control. Pretender's been staying safe on this Vygar, but I don't know how much longer that's going to last. You see Minji dishing the damage with those shurikens.
Yeah, and Minji definitely knows the trade pattern very well. There is a short setup time. I believe it's like 0.3 or 0.5 seconds for the event horizon, and Minji just popping his E directly towards Pretender and showing him what's up. So right now, I really feel like Frank Esports, as we mentioned, their early game plan kind of revolved around the priority that Vygar and Xin Zhao should have given them. Now that is gone, I feel like their only option is to wait this out until the late game. Vygar does have infinite scaling, and Gwen pretty much the same thing. It's not exactly infinite, but from what we've seen, you might as well call it infinite. So I think that's the only hope for Frank Esports right now. They're down about 5,000 gold. They have lost control of the map. They have wards in both sides of their jungle. So it just seems like a very long, drawn-out game plan on the side of Frank is the only thing that's available for them.
And you can see that they've really shifted into that turtling mindset, right? Playing more defensively. They tried for a couple of plays that just didn't pan out. They tried to bait a death brush and nothing doing. Okay, I guess it's just time to stop the bleeding as best as possible. Already lost the one tower. Maybe we can hang on to the other two in the outer side. Try and maybe handshake a dragon for a Rift Herald. The problem is there's about a full minute timer difference, and the way that Beyond are playing right now, I do feel like tempo is the order of the day.
It definitely is, and I would just wonder when Beyond Gaming is actually going to fold Liang into the mid lane. Liang right now is absolutely massive. 300 gold bounty on him, he's 50 CS up on his opponent. If he just lands a couple of shock blasts, then Frank Esports have to give up the mid lane tower. So that's kind of my big question on when Beyond Gaming are going to... It is risking an engage, but I think with his power spike right now, it's definitely worthwhile to just have him go mid and break the game wide open.
I think he's going to try to do top first at this point. I mean, that tower's not looking so healthy. Remember, Shelly got a full extra charge off, and Kurt couldn't really do much about it. Yeah, he was ignoring Kurt until the point when the mist goes down, and then he just trades out better. Could come right back into this, knows it's down, and just wash, rinse, repeat. But meanwhile, it's free Rift Herald for Husha. So they've just got so many advantages on the map, and they don't really risk anything here. A dive in the mid wouldn't necessarily work out in Frank's favor because the numbers advantage really isn't quite enough. And yeah, I think as soon as Liang takes this tower, he is going to fold into mid.
Yeah, it does look like Liang, with his sustain build, is pretty happy to just take this one. There's a lot of gold to be gained right here. 600 popping into his pocket. Oof. He has the topside route completely warded out as well, so it should be a very safe transition. I don't expect him to be ambushed whatsoever. And now the push is going to be even stronger. He has a Herald to boot in this one.
And he keeps stealing jungle camps away from Hollow. Man, it's got to feel bad. Eminem and K2 know that they're not going to be able to withstand this. Again, though, Dragon's on the Rift, too. Beyond can just keep stacking it up. I'm curious to see what kind of Rift we get this game. And, you know, obviously Beyond Gaming, I think the game plan for them is to try and close this out before Soul becomes an option. I certainly like that one as they look to pick up this mountain here. Husha does get a slight assist from Eminem. You gotta try. Timing is always a little bit tricky there, but True Shot Barrage does
Cloud.
confirm exactly what happens. Yeah.
That's probably the worst one for Beyond Gaming. When you have full map control, Hextech is absolutely amazing. When you're playing Poke comp or Assassination comp, Infernal is amazing, but Cloud is kind of meh. Cloud is kind of a Clown Drake in this one.
I mean, that is why it's called Clown Drake, even back in the day, right? It was always a little underwhelming.
Like, I feel like there are some situations where Cloud Drake is super good for you, especially if you have the right composition for it. But unfortunately, this isn't the case. I really feel like Beyond Gaming got kind of a low dice roll on this one. They hit a 1 out of 20. But they're still in a very commanding position. And I'm sort of surprised that they aren't going for the full Herald charge onto the mid lane, actually waiting for a full item buy where they could potentially just completely destroy Frank Esports. This is a very strong reset timing coming in from them. It is a little bit delayed, but they're playing very slow and measured at this point. And as you can tell, 5K to 7K now, Frank Esports, they're not matching this one. They're not aware that this is coming.
I mean, it's conservative, but it's also very clean, too. And, you like to see that from a Beyond Gaming side, that I think they themselves have looked shaky in some of these risk-taking moves. And I wonder if coming into the week, the idea is, okay, let's see how well we can execute it. And Liang is starting to hurt. Eminem's health bar, a big bite taken out of it. No way you can defend that. Here's the Rift charge. I mean, you can try, Eminem, but that thing is going to get cut through like paper, and Shelly gets the charge off. They almost finish it before... They actually finished it at around the same time. Barely any damage dealt to Shelly, and now the teleport. This is going to be round 2.
And that's what I meant by I don't think Frank Esports was reading this play that well. You know, Vigar was not in position to really pressure the tower or have enough time to come down. And this is one thing I have kind of criticized from Kurt. I just feel like he doesn't try to put enough pressure into the side lanes. They definitely could have stayed for a couple more seconds, try to get a little bit something done into the bot side.
Yeah.
Remember those team objectives that you take. Those team bounties are spread equally across the team, so it's not just Gwen getting the gold, which to be honest, is not going to propel her any closer in this matchup, but it's the entire team getting the gold. So, sometimes you do have to risk it for the biscuit, in my view, and just try to go for a little bit more. Leon right now, you can see he's 2 levels up on Kurt. He has full sustain here, and he's willing to fight Gwen, just walking into her hollowed mist underneath the tower too. That's
how you know something's gone wrong. If you're a Gwen player and you're getting like run at by a Jace, your lane has gone wrong. There's a gap there. Husha in the jungle trying to steal away camps as well. Holo and K2 will sniff this, but the question is, can they really even do much about it? They're also going to bring Kino to the party to help secure, and oh boy, Frank Esports, they may have infinite scaling, but you got to get to that point. It's only 19 and a half minutes into the game, and they're looking at losing all of their inner turrets here, Clement.
Yeah, this is not a good look for them. However, I really like what Beyond Gaming are doing here. This is actually a front. Like, they're willing to play Frank 3v5 and just have Jinx farm up the map. This is how confident they are. They know that there is no vision behind them. So they're just willing to put this up and know that Frank Esports aren't even going to engage on them.
And even if they do, they've got backup. I mean, it's free real estate at this point. They can just take whatever they want on the map. So now you've got the mid lane tower easily falls. Wako just turret pokes it down. Gets excited. They actually want to engage this, and they're going to bring in Eminem. Oh, he goes right over the wall. Holo, though, is going to get caught. Should get deleted, but no, he's able to walk away, and Beyond may have bit off a bit more than they could chew. The Super Mega Death Rocket intercepted by the front line, and Holo stays alive. Beyond lose 1, but not a whole lot more.
Yeah, they also burned the teleport from Liang, so that was definitely a questionable move right there. I feel like Beyond Gaming, they could just play the 2 sides and chip each other out a little bit slower. However, on the flip side, they do get everything from Eminem, so they are setting up for a very strong Baron play, while the Summoners are not going to be there. For Husha's side, he didn't really expend his, so he's still going to be very threatening with the possibility of an insect on Eminem further onto the Baron play. So not a complete waste, but you could definitely fault them for not playing as cleanly as they should.
That's true. Now, Pretender at least does have access to the exhaust if a big 5v5 does come through, but I don't know if that's going to be much of a saving grace, because it just... the difference in some of the damages right now. I mean, again, the Jace, he's a full item up on Gwen. He's still got the level advantage. I mean, Liang is massive right now, and it's been a relatively quiet Akali game from Minji, but that doesn't mean it can't just open up into a number of kills. That Rocket Belt's in play. Anything's possible.
And if nothing happens here, I just want to commend Liang on putting on his dancing shoes in that play. He dodged every single skill shot from Eminem and didn't even pop his Yomus at all. He was that chill. He was like, I got this. I'll queue over to the minion wave. I'll walk sideways, and Eminem just couldn't find Liang at all. But Liang's finding Frank.
Yeah, they are going to actually manage to land on a Husha, but just barely blowing it up. However, they're caught in a bit of a pickle right now, as those Jinx Rockets are starting to sting. K2 going to take the front of it, and Minji going to finally find himself a kill as the rest of the team is on the run. Frank cannot withstand the assault from the rocket poke. It just keeps on coming. Minji going to be forced to flash back in this. Not the cleanest finish as they lose Husha in this fight, but they take down Kurt and K2, and will be able to walk away with it.
I've been very unimpressed by this Hex Drinker so far. We have seen more people going for it now that it scales based off of AD. So technically, if you are ahead of your opponent, then it can be very valuable. But I think in most instances, you would still see the Sterix Gauge kind of be the go-to item. Both times Husha has been blown up, it really hasn't been magic damage at all. He didn't even get much use out of his shield, just gets blown up by the physical. We're going to watch the replay again. Again, I feel like Beyond Gaming are actually forcing things too hard to their detriment. They land the poke, they should just wait around and get a free objective here, but Husha tries to force things by taking down the ward. It pays with his life, and watch this Chad play from Wako. He actually burns his cleanse just to walk through Event Horizon and to get a kill. It's a pretty cool move, but I honestly feel like it's not really necessary.
Look, necessary is one thing. Styling is another. I think Wako is definitely the type of player to really buy into the get excited hype. And we've seen this a couple times this game, right? He's stepped up. We can talk about Husha getting blown up all we want, but that fight up at the inhibitor turret, that was Wako starting it. He takes out the tower, gets excited, and full engages, and then Husha steps up in the front and ends up getting blown up. But, He's also not itemizing against the AD, you're right. Like, I think he's more concerned about the Vygar, but Pretender is a ways away at the moment. I want to actually see what his stacks are like, but I don't know if it's going to matter this game because Liang is chasing down Kurt. Holo is there. He's not going to finish the job, but it feels like it doesn't matter. Beyond have owned the neutral objectives this game, and there's no reason to suggest they won't get the Baron and start for the final push.
I really want to see them play around their poke just a little bit more because the second best champion from Minji is their Zoe, and it would be a good telltale sign if they can actually play a poke composition. But so far, Beyond Gaming, you can tell very clearly by this game, their entire mentality is just kill and capture and kill. Like, they don't really wait for Liang. They're just like, whatever. If you land something, good on him, but we're going in regardless. So it's kind of interesting to see. And to be completely honest, it's pretty much okay this game. They're almost up 10k. They can realistically finish the game however fashion they want to. But it definitely is interesting that they're not really utilizing the Jace as much as I think some more experienced teams with the poke composition would have used.
Yeah, I think there's definitely definitely a couple of kinks to work out when it comes to Beyond Gaming, like full teamwork, engage, full like clean play. I've been talking about how it has been a clean game, but that's just because they've been so dominating. You know, we can't forget the J team match. We can't forget the DCG match. I think this is a team that still has some work to do, but this is an encouraging
I'm just saying
sign.
they could have gotten a lot more out of their last two pushes. The way the last two pushes ended was, I think, was actually pretty underwhelming given the lead that they had, and I'm just surprised that they aren't leaning into Liang a little bit more. Liang, with just one combo, is taking Kurt down to 300 HP. So
lethality Jace, man, it's disgusting. Yeah. Like Gwen is only immune for like as long as that mist stays up, and also I love that Liang's just like, all right, well I can't shoot you, I guess I'll just run at you and hit you with a hammer instead.
No, that's the Jace way. That's the Jaces we like to see.
It is, yeah, as seen on the hit TV show Arcane.
Oh, have you seen how ripped Jace actually is?
It's actually disgusting. It's not a spoiler anymore, right? Like I feel like everyone's had a chance to see it. Like when he's making like the big hammer
season
weapon,
2,
it's like,
episode
whoa.
1. Oh man,
yeah.
This guy is not just an innovator. He hits the gym pretty hard too.
Yeah, he's the face of Piltover, man, Mr. Progress. Anyways, back into this one. Eminem trying his luck at Wako, but ooh, those traps were very close. K2 forced to flash away. There goes the cage, and Frank got a little ambitious there. I think they're going to have a hard time finding a fight for a while. Oh, there's the shock blast.
Taking Eminem down to half here, and a little thing about this matchup is I think we can tell why Pretender... Oh, Eminem actually backing. That was super risky from Eminem. He could have gotten interrupted by Kino right there. Still manages to find the complete recall, but I just wanted to mention that this is why Pretender is not running the Predator. I feel like for Frank Esports, they're much more used to playing just in formation and trying to force the enemy into a straight-up 5v5, so it's not really about early roaming for this team, and I think he is going to get a lot more use here.
Ooh, Eminem taken very low. Super Mega Death Rocket going to get intercepted, but not fully as Minji is hunting. And meanwhile, the front line collapses. Wako dancing around the outside as the rest of the team just keeps Hollow away. Pretender, the last man standing. But for how long as the Rockets take him out? It is a clean ace, and you better believe that's got to be the base.
That was the quickest collapse as a team fight I have ever seen. Frank Esports, they were still standing with 3 ultimates unused. They didn't even have time to press their buttons, and the fight was over. That's just what happens when you give Minji as a colleague. Like, he just assassinates your entire back line. He doesn't really care about your feelings. He just walks in, and this was I really think this was a draft gap coming in between these two sides. Beyond Gaming had a very clear priority on what they wanted. It was a Kali over everything. We can give over the Gwen. It doesn't even matter. And for Frank Esports, they try to play a top-heavy game. They went with the Gwen. They went with the Xin Zhao and the Vygar that is supposed to have early game priority, but they still played mainly towards the bot side, and they kind of fumbled their leads. I felt like they actually established a great start with that 3-2 dive where they got the 2 kills, but on the second play, they just overforced things way too hard, threw over all of their advantage, and that was just kind of the end of their sort of mid-game tempo-focused team. They couldn't scale up into the late game. We didn't really see Vygar have an impact. And overall, it just feels like Frank are desperately trying to branch out, but they still haven't gotten the hang of most of these different compositions.
Still a lot of growing pains from this young squad, and at the same time, I think they are trying to run before they can walk here, and it's tough to do against anybody, but Megabank Beyond Gaming certainly turned things up a little bit in this one after the early game stumbles, or after the early game it really wasn't so much a stumbles. It was actually just a good play from Frank Esports, as you said. I think there's not much you can do when you're this far behind, but here was the final one. The moment Eminem's health bar gets decimated, it's like, oh yeah, Minji's around the side, it's over. It's just so devastating to watch, and they were so far ahead, they almost couldn't lose.
I love that play coming in from Kino with the Q flash engage. You could actually jump the Winter's Bite over targets if you use the Q flash. So a lot of times people will just be anticipating and try to block for your AD carry. You can just leap right over and still tag Eminem with the Frostbite right there and continue to kill everyone. So it was just such a good example of the strengths of Beyond Gaming as a team, what they really excel at, and it kind of is night and day when you see Beyond Gaming with the composition they're familiar with against a composition they don't really know how to run. And this is kind of the example of a comp that they're super familiar. They just know how to do everything here. I would like to go over some of the picks here. I think it was a little bit weird that we actually saw the Leona take priority over something like the Aphelios, which we kind of expected Aphelios always kind of go first here. There was still Nautilus up in the draft, but you know, they kind of opted for this Leona very early on, which is kind of a telltale sign that maybe they are a little bit more reliant on this champion pick coming in from the side of K2. Again, the Gwen plus Xin Zhao combo, I just don't think it's a Frank specialty. Like, I totally expected Frank to actually just ban the Gwen, and if they go with the Graves, I think it fits their style a lot more. You know, Graves just kind of wave clears into the top lane. He's not really expected to come out as a carry position. As long as he neutralizes the lane, it's fine. But yeah, it's just kind of a head scratching drought from Frank Esports that didn't really showcase a lot of their strengths.
Yeah, I think they were really trying to experiment, and maybe they might have just like kind of outsmarted themselves a little bit on the draft phase. I do think there was some potential there with some of the damage dealing for Pretender, but he just never got to the point where you get that hyper scaling. I have not been impressed with Kurt. You mentioned it earlier. I think, yeah, if they want to just give him the wave clear or the Gragas duty, maybe that's the best play. Eminem also just, yeah, didn't really have as much of a chance on this Ezreal compared to something like the Aphelios, and Frank has some answers to try and find. But whoo boy, would you look at that damage for Leon, because he had a fun game of League of Legends, let's just say.
I just want to remind everyone, they actually triple banned Liang into the top lane. And
he's still the MVP.
This is absolutely ridiculous. Like, this is... yeah.
43% of the team damage.
I think that's the problem with Frank's drafting. To be fair, a lot of this damage was coming from him just whacking on Kurt the entire game. But that's the problem with their strategy. If you're going to pick a Gwen top, which is supposed to be the best top laner in the entire meta, what are you doing banning away another 3 top lane champions and still getting decimated by the enemy top laner? It just feels like they're feeding infinite amount of resources to Kurt's lane and getting absolutely no return. Like, what did they get out of banning 3 champions and first picking Gwen? They didn't get anything out of it. Why not just... I think they should have just stuck to their guns and just rolled with a strategy of priority bot lane first and strong picks and trying to capitalize off Eminem. This strategy of, you know, trying to shift things top lane is just... It just feels so weird. It doesn't feel like Frank Esports at all.
No, I think they're definitely going to have to go back to the drawing board for this one, but that game is all done and dusted. We have a couple more up today. We're going to take a quick break before we get there, but don't go anywhere. Impunity versus Deep Cross Gaming is up next.